The Roman Empire, the undisputed superpower of the ancient world, has arrived. 100,000 professional warriors.
3,000? Do these desert dwellers think they are fighting a tribe? They are facing the Mao! Tell the men, we will finish this before the sun reaches its peak. Don't leave a single one alive to tell the tale.
Imagine standing on a cold desert ridge as the sun begins to bleed over the horizon. Behind you stand 3,000 brothers in arms.
What are you waiting for? By Allah, the very thing you fear is what you set out to fight. We do not fight them with numbers or strength. We fight them with this faith that Allah has honored us with. Stand up, for victory or paradise awaits. Time.
The year is 629 AD. Behind you stand 3,000 brothers, in arms, weary from travel but resolute in spirit. But then you look forward. The horizon has turned into a shimmering, terrifying wall of steel. 100,000 professional warriors, armored from head to toe, their spears forming a forest of death. The odds aren't just against you, they are mathematically impossible. It is one Muslim for every 33 Romans. The air is thick with the scent of leather, dust, and impending slaughter. Most armies in history would have turned and fled at this sight. But these 3,000 men are not moving. Among them stands a man who has never lost a battle, and 3 commanders who have already accepted their martyrdom. This is not just a battle for territory, it is a fight for the very survival of a faith that was only just beginning to spread. Today, we witness the ultimate tactical masterstroke. This is the story of the Battle of Mutah. At this time, the world is a playground for 2 titans, the Sassanid Persian Empire and the Byzantine Roman Empire. For the desert-dwelling Arabs, challenging the might of Rome was considered a suicide mission, something no sane man would attempt. But the spark that lit this global fire was not greed or conquest, it was a single act of cold-blooded betrayal. Prophet Muhammad had sent a diplomatic messenger, Harith ibn Umair al-Azdi, to the Ghassanid kingdom, which was a powerful puppet state of the Roman Empire. Under every ancient law, even among enemies, messengers were considered untouchable. Yet, the Ghassanid governor captured Harith, humiliated him, and executed him in cold blood. In Medina, this news was received like a lightning strike. Spilling the blood of a diplomat was not just a crime, it was a direct declaration of war. The Prophet Muhammad immediately mobilized a force of 3,000 men. But he did something unprecedented that signaled the gravity of this mission. He appointed a specific chain of command, knowing the dangers that lay ahead. First was Zayd ibn Harithah, a man of incredible loyalty. Then Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's own cousin, known for his legendary eloquence. And finally, Abdullah ibn Rawaha, the warrior, poet who knew that words could be as sharp as any blade. The instructions were clear: if Zayd falls, Ja'far takes the banner. If Ja'far falls, Abdullah takes it. The Prophet saw the shadow of sacrifice hanging over this mission. As the 3,000 marched north into the scorching heat of the Jordan desert, they had no idea that the Roman Emperor Heraclius himself was watching. He wasn't sending a small border guard. He was sending a tidal wave of 100,000 men to crush this new threat once and for all. When the Muslims reached the region of Man, their scouts returned with reports that made even the bravest soldiers go pale. The combined forces of the Romans and their allies had gathered 100,000 men. A desperate war council was held in the middle of the night. Some suggested writing back to Medina to wait for reinforcements. But Abdullah ibn Rawaha stood up, his voice cutting through the fear like a sword. He reminded them that they did not fight by numbers or equipment, but by the faith Allah had given them. It was victory or martyrdom, and in both there was no defeat. The battle began at dawn in the valley of Mutah. Zayd ibn Harithah chose the terrain with the genius of a seasoned veteran. He positioned the small army in a narrow area between hills, making it impossible for the 100,000 Romans to use their massive numbers to surround them. The sound was deafening. The rhythmic clashing of Roman gladius against Arab scimitars, the screams of horses, and the dust that rose so high it blotted out the sun. The Romans were stunned. These 3,000 men weren't fighting like humans. They were fighting like lions who had forgotten how to retreat. Zayd led from the very front, a relentless force in the center of the chaos. But the Roman commanders soon realized that the strength of this army flowed from its banner. Suddenly, a forest of spears and a rain of arrows targeted a single man, Zayd ibn Harithah. He stood his ground, refusing to take a single step back until his body finally faltered under the weight of a dozen wounds. As Zayd fell, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib lunged forward, seizing the banner before it could touch the blood-soaked sand. Ja'far became a whirlwind on the battlefield. Byzantine accounts from that era describe his courage as almost supernatural. But then, the unthinkable happened. A Roman sword severed his right hand. Without a second of hesitation, Ja'far grabbed the banner with his left. Then, his left hand was also cut off. In a moment that has been etched into history for 14 centuries, Ja'far used the stumps of his arms to hug the banner to his chest, refusing to let the symbol of his faith fall to the earth. He received over 90 wounds.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
He finally collapsed. Immediately, Abdullah ibn Rawaha took the lead, fighting with a desperate intensity until he, too, joined his brothers in martyrdom. The sun was setting, the commanders were gone, and the Muslim line began to waver. The Roman generals smiled. They believed the slaughter would be finished by breakfast. The banner now lay in the dust. The Muslim army was like a leaderless ship in a storm of 100,000 enemies. But in the back ranks stood a man who had only recently embraced Islam. A man the Romans did not know yet. A man named Khalid ibn Walid. The soldiers turned to Khalid in desperation. He was not an official appointee, but he was a military genius of the highest order. He knew that if they tried to fight a traditional war the next day, they would all be dead within the hour. He didn't just need a sword, he needed a miracle of the mind. Under the cover of darkness, Khalid executed one of the most brilliant psychological operations in military history. He ordered his entire army to switch positions. The men who fought on the right moved to the left. The men in the back moved to the front. He gave the men new banners and told them to wash their clothes. Most brilliantly, he sent a small group of cavalry behind a nearby hill with orders to gallop in circles at dawn, kicking up massive clouds of dust. When the sun rose, the Romans looked across the valley and gasped. The faces they had fought yesterday were gone. They saw new faces, clean clothes, and different banners. The massive dust clouds on the horizon made it look like a fresh army of tens of thousands had arrived from Medina during the night. Khalid didn't wait for them to recover. He launched a sudden, brutal assault. He broke 9 swords that day, carving through the Roman front lines with such ferocity that the Byzantines began to panic. They whispered to each other, wondering where these reinforcements had come from. Then came Khalid's final masterstroke. He began a slow, organized retreat back into the deep, trackless desert. To the Romans, this looked like a classic trap. They feared Khalid was baiting them into a massive hidden army waiting in the dunes. Paralyzed by this fear, the 100,000 Romans stayed put. They watched, frozen, as the survivors of Mutah marched away in perfect formation. When the army finally returned to Medina, some people called them the deserters, but the Prophet corrected them. He called them the attackers and gave Khalid the title that would define him for eternity, Safala, the sword of Allah. The Battle of Mutah was a tactical miracle. The Romans, despite their 100,000 men, had failed to destroy a tiny force of 3,000. For the rest of the world, the message was clear. The Roman Empire was no longer invincible. Khalid bin Walid would go on to fight over 100 battles and never lose a single one. His genius was so undeniable that even before he embraced Islam, his presence changed the course of history. In the Battle of Uhud, it was Khalid's strategic flanking maneuver that turned the tide against the Muslim forces. Even then, facing the Prophet Muhammad himself, Khalid did not taste defeat. He remains the only commander in history to hold such a record. But it was here, in the dust of Mutah, where he used that same genius to save the believers from certain extinction. This was the moment he truly became the sword of Allah, a weapon that could never be broken. The courage of Ja'far and the genius of Khalid remind us that strategy can overcome any number. Which part of Khalid's plan surprised you the most, the shuffle or the dust trap? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the greatest battles of history.